In today's webinar, How to Identify, Disrupt, and Dismantle Unauthorized Product Distribution, we'll be discussing how to generate actionable intelligence and leverage investigative tactics to disrupt and dismantle infringing online networks at their source. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers for today's presentation. We are joined by our experts, Joshua Hopping and Darla Rumsey. With over 12 years of brand protection experience, Joshua Hopping specializes in open source intelligence analysis aimed at uncovering the true identity and scope of online activities of threat actors infringing upon a company's intellectual property. He is a pioneer in providing actionable intelligence that can be used to dismantle and disrupt the infringing actions of counterfeit networks, trademark, copyright, and patent abusers, and fish kit developers. Darla Rumsey is a senior brand client service manager with MarkMonitor, supporting several large brands. Darla brings over 25 years of experience building and maintaining all types of channel and partner programs. She manages clients worldwide to successfully protect their brands and reputations online, including auto manufacturers, hotel brands, open source web application companies, and clients in the entertainment industry. Darla has been providing support and analysis across all brand protection modules at MarkMonitor for over 9 years. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Josh to get us started.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining this awesome webinar. Kind of give you a roadmap of what we're doing. We're going to be talking, first of all, about the problem, a little bit about the challenges of finding and identifying your threat actors online before looking at identifying networks and the importance of those networks and identifying the who they are and how big their operation is. After that, we'll be talking about next steps, the data-driven decisions that you can then use, how you can use the data that you then gather through your investigations before kind of giving some case studies, and then we have our Q&A. So that's kind of a roadmap of where we're going today. So, Darla, if you want to kick us off.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about this topic today. I've had many discussions with clients over the years on this topic, and it's always good to be aware, always good for all brands to be aware of at any time of what's happening with your brand across the board on all online activities. We know, we've seen the problem is big. The numbers are high. I think the numbers that we're looking at are on online counterfeiting and unauthorized goods are an all-time high of about like $250 billion, and seeing more and more that these networks are contributing to a lot of that, making these products more and more available and hiding from us. So with that, let's take a look at how or why. Why is it getting so big, and why is it so easy for these networks to hide online? Looking at e-commerce websites, we all know it's getting easier all the time. Anyone can register sites with Privacy Protect. They register in different countries that it's hard to get to them. Adding fake whois. We see a lot of these e-commerce websites that offer a lot of products online. They register hundreds of sites. We're constantly battling them, constantly trying to send cease and desist letters and combat them and take them down. And we might get a few down, and then they'll get a few more up. It's a vicious cycle that we really try to stay on top of. The marketplace sellers, they're really hard to nail down too, and we're actively always trying to stay on top of what they're doing. And if they're moving around, anyone can choose any type of seller account. Any business can create fake seller accounts, use fake information. Again, this is another aspect, another area to look at that they can be hiding, and it can be difficult to stay on top of who they are. And then social media is just growing leaps and bounds, and impersonation sites, and I'm seeing more and more often, and we even know that many of the social media sites are going to start becoming selling platforms. Who are they? Social media is tough. It's easy to impersonate. It's easy to just create accounts that and hide from us. So it's hard to really nail down all this activity, where it's happening, and if they're connected. So with that, more questions to ask ourselves is, how do we know? How do we know if it's a network? We have a lot of big brands with just a lot of activity in different areas, and it can be really hard to stay on top of that, maintaining your regular brand strategy, and then try to step back and really look and think and ask ourselves, is there a possible network problem within my brand, and where is it happening? So many of the questions that I ask my clients and my analysts that work with me that are in the accounts that work on the data is to look for patterns. Looking for patterns in websites. What's really nice about having an analyst actively looking at your data is to look for repetitive use in websites. Are they using the same images? Are there patterns of how they're offering the product? They're getting they're getting more savvy these days, so they're not just framing our sites. They have their own technique, and they have very active paid search campaigns that support those websites. So are you looking at paid search and looking at some of those ad network campaigns? Are they leading to these websites that use the same type of patterns and use of images? Do they have a social media campaign? When we have analysts that are looking across the board at all these different areas, including marketplaces, do they dig a little deeper and look in the marketplace listing? Is there a link to a website, and is there an aha where you're like, I've seen this before? We're very actively now, with many of my accounts, we look across the board at all of these different aspects to see if we can start connecting dots. And even if you can connect a few dots, I think it really serves a really good purpose to try to dig a little deeper and see how much more. Are we doing enough reverse who is searches to see if there's just a little bit more information there that will connect those dots? So with that, Josh is going to cover ways that we can go a little further and address some of these answers and answer some of these and see what else we can look for.
Thank you, Darla. As Darla has talked about, it is easy to hide online, but I have good news for you. We can uncover the identity and the size and scope of these networks just as well. And that's when we talk about identifying networks and investigating. We really are answering two questions. Who are they? Who are the threat actors? Who are the people out there doing it? And what are they doing? And these are questions that you can have no matter what your business problem. If it's gray market, is it partner compliance, is it counterfeit, trademark, is it online streaming videos? It doesn't matter exactly what type of abuse it is. Really, the bottom line is you have a problem. You want to know who owns the marketplace store, who owns the website, and then you also want to know what are they doing, what else they're doing. Is what I've identified that one site, is that it, or do they have hundreds more? So those are two questions that we ask. And in one case, is the reason we ask these is because a lot of times we find out that we can have one network that has multiple sellers, okay, different names. You kind of see this link chart here on the side, been grayed out for protection, but what we found is we took a client, they had a top Amazon seller, and we started looking into that seller. And originally we thought it was just one person, but we found out they had a total of 22 different Amazon stores, all connected back to one individual through 18 registered different companies. And so in effect, you had 43%, okay, 43% of the problem on Amazon was connected to one gentleman. Now, if we didn't do an investigation, if we didn't look into this, we could have said, oh, well, we had 22 different sellers. And you start tackling those listings and treating them as individuals, and then what happens is as soon as one listing goes down or one store goes down, all those goods just goes right on over to the next store, to the next seller name. But by investigating, by going a little deeper and connecting those dots, all of a sudden now you know who to target. You go to that one person and you can effectively take out 43% of your problem through one enforcement mechanism rather than trying to tackle 22 different seller names. So that's one of the importance of investigating and identifying who's actually behind it, who's actually there, and what are they doing. Another deal of that is we think about multi-level marketing. Multi-level marketing has been around for a while. It is something a lot of legitimate companies do. It's a great marketing strategy. The counterfeiters are picking up on that. They're doing the same exact thing. They will they'll recruit affiliates to go out there and register domain names and register places, and it allows them to have a level of anonymity that they can't find them. So when you do your typical brand enforcement strategy, you might find 300 websites, and as Darla said, they may have similar website templates. They may look the same, product the same, but they're owned by different registrants. And so you could be scratching your head going, wow, we have a lot of different problems here. We have 100 different infringers to tackle. Well, by investigating that and looking at all the 100 sites and pulling the pieces together, you can discover that there actually is one entity that's behind all those affiliates. And if you find that central entity underneath there, you can then take the money out of the equation. If you take down the affiliate, there's another affiliate to come right back in. If you take out the money, it takes down everything at once. Up here, this was a counterfeit company based out of China, and they were offering people 30% commission rate to go out and register a domain name and sell their goods. And so you can see that there's a lot of money involved in there, and it's a lot of people who would want to come and join that deal. But by investigating, digging below the surface, kind of pulling some threads and connecting all kinds of information together, we're able to connect it back to the central company where it was, and then that could take out that money. So again, investigate, pulling things behind it to make sure you know exactly who's behind the infringing network, not just what looks to be there. Other ways when we're identifying networks is you can use international shipping data. It sounds odd to use shipping data, talking about the online world, but it actually can be very useful. You can look at Chinese export data to find out where the infringers are going, what's happening. You can identify geographical areas of concerns to help out. You can find out, maybe you have a counterfeiter that's making a pink jacket, but you don't make pink jackets, or they're selling a pink jacket in a country that you didn't offer it in. Well, that's great business intelligence and useful to help you make decisions of how to go forward with your company. In some cases, it's been fun in a sense of tracking these guys down. I had a client that had done a physical raid of some goods in the UK, and they had gathered all this stuff up, and they were kind of doing it, and we were presenting some data from the online world to them, and we had a Alibaba seller that was making the jackets. They had it, and we looked at shipping data, and we found that that seller was shipping jackets into the United Kingdom. So the odds were the jackets that they just seized could have very well come from this Alibaba seller over here in the online world. So you kind of see how they get that connection back and forth. We had another seller where we took it and we had the Alibaba seller, we tracked their shipping data, and we tracked them right on into United States of America, into New York. And we tracked down the company in New York, and we found that that company in New York was selling the same counterfeit goods on their website and on the street corners in New York. So you have this huge, the entire distribution channel that you can now enforce upon because you know who's doing it, you know the full scope of their operation, and now you can actually start dismantling it rather than just taking down a website or then taking down a listing. So it kind of pulls it all together and say, okay, let's take a look at the shipping data. Let's look at the website and look at the full picture to find out what's happening rather than just kind of focusing on one particular piece of it. Now with that, Darla's going to talk a little bit about now what. You got the stuff, what kind of data-driven decisions we can make out of that.
Thanks, Josh. That's a great overview. Exactly. Now we come back and we ask our questions to ourselves. What does it mean? We have all this data, and what does it mean to us as the brand manager, the brand owner? What am I going to do with this data? What decisions do I need to make? So we can ask ourselves a few questions. Is the problem as damaging as I thought? I'll give a couple examples. I had a client that had a small website issue that we were uncovering through regular reports, sending cease and desist letters. The analyst came to me and said, I feel it's a little bigger than what we see. I'm seeing more and more, maybe more than I can get after on a monthly basis. We brought it to the client. We did some investigating and uncovered a much larger threat than we anticipated. The client, it led them to litigation that was very successful, very good outcome for them. They found it very beneficial. A second, taking a different approach, how to make these decisions. I had a client that had products that were being very available online at a very low price, that they were very convinced that it was a counterfeit problem. Chose to quickly look into the reports, which uncovered shipping data, a lot of shipping data that led everything back to the products that were coming directly from one of their manufacturers. So a totally different direction than they anticipated, but they discovered immediately that it was not a counterfeit issue, it was a gray market issue, which led them and really sent them in the right direction quickly to make very good decisions. Another question we can ask is the cost of enforcement. Looking at your data set now on your investigation will help you make decisions of, is our current brand protection program sufficient? Are we doing the best that we can, and is it tackling the issues at a success rate that we're happy with? Or do we need to take this further? Do we need to escalate our problems to law enforcement, or does it need to be escalated to litigation, or possibly hire outside counsel to help us address these problems? And then finally, we can also determine how important it is to tackle this right now. Is this something that needs immediate attention, or is this something that we can set aside and not focus on as much right now? The data really helps you make these decisions. Like I noted before, if we determine that you're going to go through law enforcement, it is a very effective process, but it can be very timely. So with that, it leads me back to Josh. He's going to address other ways to move forward and utilize the data.
Yeah, before I do that, something Darla mentioned that kind of reminded me of a story. Sometimes what you don't find is just as important as what you do find, okay? So what I mean by that is we had a client, and they had an internal company struggle. They had this Chinese company that they thought for sure was a high-value target. They were worried about it. They were losing sleep over this company. So they came to us, and they said, can you help us? We want to know, what is this infringer doing? So I looked into them, and I found nothing. I really did. I found that they had one little kiosk in a mall in China. They didn't really have an online presence. They didn't have e-commerce sites. They didn't have social media accounts. They didn't have marketplace. They just had this one little place. And by giving them that information, it really helped them make a decision. They say, you know what, this really wasn't that big of a deal. I don't have to lose sleep about that. I don't have to pursue and try to have lots of resources into this particular infringer, because there really is not that much damage. So sometimes we may think, oh, well, there's nothing there. We failed, or it didn't come out. But actually, no. Sometimes what we do not find is just as important as what we do find. So that's something to keep in mind when you're investigating as well. But to get back on the track, that's a freebie there for you guys. But getting back on track, we're talking about what's next. Once you identify who the people are, once you identify the size and scope of the problem, and you ask those questions that Darla had about how your pain points of your company, then you can move into the enforcement mechanism. And one way you could do that is by a systematic and a target approach. And what I mean by this is, utilizing your current brand protection strategies, you can then send a cease and desist letters or whatever else out to and target all the websites, all the marketplace listings, all the social media accounts, all at one time. It's a very targeted, systematic deal. Just imagine the Monday morning, for example, somebody will have, when they walk in and they found that 200 of the websites are down, that all 22 of their Amazon stores are down, all their listings down, all at the same time. talk about pulling your hair out by the roots. It's like, oh man. Well, that's the kind of problem we want to make the users have. We really want to make them have a bad day. We want everything to go down so they cannot shift things around, they can't take it over and everything else. So that's really helpful in that aspect. Well, also, when you're talking about that, it could be if it's a partner of yours and you're looking and they're a partner compliance, you have a multi-level marketing campaign, for example. You may not want to do cease and desist letters. You may want to discover who they are and then go have a conversation with them. Pick up the phone, or maybe send this softer business letter to them to help them bring them back into compliance. And so all that is something you could do once you know who's doing the problem. Once you identified who these people are, then you can make that decision. Other options you could do is you could do a deeper investigation. You can go in, and this is like you hiring on-the-ground investigators to go verify addresses, verify businesses, and then that is useful for law enforcement, to litigation purposes. As Darla said, sometimes that could take a little longer, but it could be very useful as well. I've had brand owners that they will go and litigate, and they'll seize PayPal accounts, seize bank accounts or other assets, and those money that they get from litigation actually help fund the brand protection program, which is great. Now, you can't do that if you don't know who to sue. If you don't know who they are or what they're doing, then you can't actually go after them. But once you investigate, then that can be an option for you to go as well. And then lastly, another option is we talk about investigating international shipping patterns. If you kind of know what the shipping patterns is from the infringers, they can help you kind of do that, shut down the demand side of things. If you know that you have a lot of goods coming into a particular country, for example, you could go and talk to the Border Patrol agents, custom agents of that particular country that say, hey, be on the lookout for shipments from this company or from this area. You can look in that as well. It could be that if you identify who's buying them, who's importing them into a country, you can go talk to that company and actually kind of go up the chain from the back end as well. So there's some different things you do with patterns that you can use the information as well. So lots of different options. It kind of depends on, again, the damage is done, how much it's going to cost, what your pain point is, and really what you want to do, as Darla talked about before. As you kind of move into the last phase of this deal, I just had a couple of case studies I want to talk about. We've told a lot of stories so far, but these are some successes that I want to highlight about removing the threat to kind of wrap up with. Here's a gentleman, kind of a young man here in Brazil. He was operating a network of 18 domain names. A lot of them were proxy sites and different aliases. And we were able to track them down through all these proxies, through social media accounts, through videos, and find his address, find his social media accounts, found lots of information about him that our client was able to turn over to law enforcement, and ultimately led to his arrest. So it's a great example of taking the online world, investigating it, looking what's happening, providing it back to law enforcement, who then went through and made a decision to arrest the gentleman. I think they had like a total of like 40 people as part of this full-on network, him and some other people that they actually ended up doing a raid on and found them. But that's a really good case study about enforcing law, working with law enforcement, working with the investigative team, and really kind of removing the threat. Because I can tell you, this gentleman's no longer registering domain names with pirated online copyrighted videos because he's in prison. So you effectively have ended that network. That network has been dismantled for all practical purposes. Another one, gentleman here with his son. This is one where people use generic marketplace seller names. They put things in there to try to hide their identity, but a lot of times there's clues. Sometimes they are really good at, sometimes they leave hints. This was one of where we had a company that had a specific style of items, and they had complete control of this particular style of their distribution channel, except for one shipment that was stolen. And then, would you believe it, that particular style ended up on Amazon. So since they didn't have an Amazon store, it was a generic store, they knew that it had to be stolen good. So we started digging into it, and we took this generic name, we connected it to a phone number, we connected it to a company, we connected it to an eBay account, and all these different kind of pieces together. Found the gentleman, found his address, his phone number, his social media account. That's why I could kind of show you a picture of him. And we put all the information together and, again, gave it back to the client, and then they were able to make a decision on, okay, what to do with this. And that's a great way of identifying the infringer, moving from beyond just a generic marketplace name or just a generic domain name to really finding out who these people are so that you can actually go after them and dismantle their network rather than sending a cease and desist letter or just kind of wiping your hands. It really is coming in there and finding them out. And this is something, again, we've seen over and over again. I show this is like counterfeit or a stolen goods issue. The other was a piracy issue. We've seen this with partner compliance. We've seen it with, we've had phish attacks where we've been able to identify codes in the phishing. We've been able to do trademark abuse. And so it really is, no matter what your business problem is, if you do the investigations, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but kind of wrap it up. But by investigating, by paying attention to your patterns, watching and seeing what kind of templates come through, and this investigate and investigate. All those things down there will lead you to conclusion like these gentlemen that I put on the case study, where either you can get money back from them to fund your program, you can put them in jail, or you can just kind of dismantle the network. So all of it kind of pulls in there, and by weighing it and looking at the benefits, and then once you get that success story, I think it's very important to share that story. You want to be able to let people know what's going on. You want to be able to share it internally with external stockholders. Internal could be that, if you're a brand protection manager, sharing it to your superiors of your company, the CEO, different places, get them buy-in that, hey, we're actually not just sending out 100 cease and desist letters. It's very important to do that, but we're also dismantling networks, and we're going after it. There's great, compelling stories. You can do PR announcements. You can go out and you can share, hey, our brand is so focused on taking care and protecting the consumers that we took down these guys and they're in prison or they've been sued or whatnot. And then that sends a kind of a social message to the other infringers to beware that you're actually on top of it and pursuing that. So lots of ways to telling that unfortunate story to places and pull it all together. So, again, lots of information, lots of deals, but pay attention to patterns, investigate and find what happens, and once you have the data, then you can make that data-driven decisions and then go off and tell your stories. Yeah, that's kind of wrap it up. So if you might, at this time, I think we can answer some questions. If you got some questions like Q&A or what you need to do.
Yeah, we're ready to open it up for Q&A. As a reminder, if you guys have any questions, please submit them via the Q&A tab located on your screen. So I do see that we had a few questions come in. Josh, I'll pass it back to you to go ahead and take those questions. Okay.
So yeah, somebody asked you, technology, right? But talk about what resources do you get this information and what resources recommend. There is a lot of different sources and pull it from, as you can imagine. A lot of it is open source information, which is you can do a lot of online searches. Google, Yahoo, things of that nature pulls in some really good information. There's other databases that you can pull from that you can find. There's some resources that are open to, sometimes private investigators have access to it, like for court records, real estate records and stuff like that. So you have to maybe look at that aspect of it. But you can pull in historical who-is records. There's some great resources on pulling in historical screenshots. And then a lot of it is just that tenacity of digging through the information and pulling the dots. You have this domain name with this address. Is the address correct? Is it a mailbox, et cetera? Is it a legitimate address? Is it a legitimate phone number? So it's kind of hard to be able to say exactly what resources because there's a lot of them, and it depends on what kind of investigation you want to pull from. So it's kind of across the board. There's one here that says, what is the reduction rate of people who've been sent cease and desist letters and they come back under a different name? I don't know if I have an exact percentage on that one, because it's hard because they come back under a different name. Unless you're investigating those people and you really identify who they are before they come back, it's going to be hard to really tie those things back again. So that's kind of, I don't know if we have empirical data on that one, but I would say that over the last 12, 13 years, I have seen a good number of people who will, lose a website, they'll take it down for whatever reason, and then they'll come back and try it again. A lot of times they'll try it with a different brand, so there'll be different brands they'll try it again, and then maybe a year or two later, then they'll come back and try your brand again. So it does happen, but I don't know if we have a hard rate on that. I'm looking down the questions. We have one about U.S. The same technique works internationally. So one of my examples, the guy who got arrested was in Brazil, so that was not a U.S.-focused investigation. So yes, the technique does work internationally. I've identified people in China. We've had private investigators and law enforcement go to China and verify the data that we found online. We had a ring of unauthorized pharmaceuticals that's based out of Eastern Europe, and we got the address and name and connection for a guy there. So yeah, it does work internationally. It is a little harder internationally than U.S. because sometimes the information you're looking for is tougher to get, but it can actually be done. Darla, you want to take...
How do we create enough pain in enforcement so they're discouraged from re-entering the market? I recommend, with the clients that I work with, we stay on top of it, and I don't let it lapse too much. We do first, seconds. Many clients will do third enforcement. We're constantly looking at, if we feel like it might be a network, I like to group them all together. I like to stay on top of enforcing on all of them at the same time. I want to escalate to ISP. We're even starting to escalate now to some registrars, trying to get if there's a brand in the domain, we're having some more success in that area. And then we go back and we go through that process, and a lot of you might be aware of, we send enforcements to sort of an escalated process. We look at starting the process all over again sometimes. Again, those are questions that the clients have to answer. Are they, how patient are they? But we want to let these infringers know that we're not going to give up. So we will go through that process again to let them know that we're not going to back down. And we do find that to be pretty effective. Another thing, too, I think, is to watch for patterns initially. So if I have an analyst come to me and say, this is really odd. I got like 6 new sites in today that all came in that were registered at the same time. I would go to that immediately and assume that, and many times that could be the same person. So right. There's lots of little different indicators, but I think my number one would be to stay on top of them and don't give up. Right, great.
I have a question here about proxies, private proxy services, and the methods used to investigate further if that information is not available. When things are proxied, there's different other methods you go through. If you dig into the HTML code, there's different codes and analysis and different clues that are kind of hidden in the website codes that you pull out. Excuse me. You can bring out information on ISP that sometimes will help. Sometimes the IP number is not helpful because it's ran by a host that is like too massive, but there's times when it actually is very beneficial to use it. So you can pull that out. There's content you could use. Sometimes you can have historical screenshots to provide you with information. Some proxy services actually give unique email addresses out to their owners, and so it's actually unique to that particular owner across the domain, so you can use that. So there's different methods you can use to investigate when it's a proxy as well. We have several questions here about working with customs or law enforcement that I want to address. So that really depends on a client-by-client basis. We've had some clients that have been very well worked with. When we talk about investigations, that's just providing you with the data. And once you actually know the data, then it's a different step way, whether that is working with a private investigator in that country, working with law enforcement in those countries or whatnot. The online piece right now is you've got to find the people first. And once you find the people, then the next step is working with law enforcement and the government. And that does vary from client to client, from people to people. I know sometimes MarkMonitor can help introduce you to people, but that is a wide-ranging deal there. And sometimes we get great help, sometimes we don't. But that really is beyond the scope of what the investigations do.
One of our questions is, what kind of alerting does the client get or have access to based on activity found by MarkMonitor? Is there a dashboard the client can see activity seen, or does MarkMonitor contact the client directly or alert of activity? I'm not sure which area, so I'll try to address many of them. Honestly, at this level, I think if you make your CSM like myself and the team that's supporting you is aware of some possible networking activity, or you're interested in this, let the team know that this is the path that you would like to take. If there's any suspicion that there might be networked activities, let's look for those. What are you guys doing? What's the team doing to watch for these? Do you see any patterns? If there is a pattern, I want to know about it. And don't report it to me on my monthly report. Shoot me an email. What did you see? Were there 15 domains registered today with our brand, and are they selling products? Is there an increased level in marketplaces in that activity? This is where I just can't stress more how important it is to stay connected to your support team. What are we looking for you? What are your priorities? And then how can we address those quickly? And what's our plan to stay on top of them?
Excellent. So I have a question there about how can you best work with large marketer like Amazon, Alibaba to shut down infringement? Great question. I think one of the best thing to do is really reaching out directly to those marketplaces and talking to them. Through your brand protection strategies, monitoring those sites and submitting enforcement through the different protocols that those marketers have in place, which is great. But there's times where you sometimes just need to reach out and talk to them. Amazon, I know, sometimes can be a stickler right now with some of their brand protection deal, but reach out as a brand owner, talk to the people, research it. MarkMonitor has people in place that actually is great at helping you facilitate those conversations if you need that. But that really where it comes on to it of not only doing the procedure of monitoring and following their protocols, but then just picking up the phone and talking to them, because a lot of times that one-on-one contact over their phone can actually have some good dividends as well. So that's a great way of doing it as well. And then last question I see that's up there about discouraging counterfeiters from hacking the product in the first place. Again, that depends on what industry you're in. And the deal is by, building in safe measures into your products. Do you have the security codes and places in there to be able to identify what are actually counterfeit, what's not a counterfeit? Are you educating the public about, hey, be careful of, or only get from there? So there's different ways that kind of comes into that one that kind of goes beyond what this webinar is really focused on. So. A lot of questions. Any more questions that I'm not seeing that didn't get addressed? If so, please ping them over to me, because I think we have a few more minutes, and I'll make sure we get them answered.
Hi, Josh. I see some questions coming in through the chat. Are you able to see those? If not, I'll read them out.
Yeah,
I am not seeing the chat. Can you go ahead and read them out for me?
Sure. How do you identify international shipping patterns? What sources can be used to identify this information?
Good question. When you're looking at international shipping patterns, a lot of it is you're trying, and there's lots of different resources out there for shipping patterns. But what you're kind of looking at is you're looking to say, okay, is there a large amount of XYZ goods going into this country or out of this country? A lot of times when we're talking about online brand protection and using it, it's actually looking at the sellers that you identify and then kind of seeing if you can find patterns out of there to see what they're doing. So a lot of times it's starting with a target and then looking backwards and kind of seeing what's happening.
Okay, I have another one here. Where do you find the best data on who is behind an Amazon account, especially from someone who is moderately bright and trying to hide fake ID buys are what I find often useful, but I am sure there are better ways to know. And just, I guess, a follow-up is, or the same question, what is the best way of hunting Amazon abusers beyond fake ID buys?
You know, that's a good question, very good question. You know, there's a couple different ways. A lot of the best ways that I know of that one is because Amazon's seller name can be so generic, and they can be just kind of like, you know, buy here, buy now, or whatever else. Is really digging into the listings and into the profiles. Start kind of monitoring to see what are they saying in the comments, where they're shipping, or sometimes there's PayPal accounts that they have in the payment information of Amazon saying, okay, you'll go here, buy here. That gives me email address or place. Sometimes there's phone numbers. Sometimes there's different places. Are they using the same account elsewhere? So it can be a lot harder to connect the dots. Sometimes you need to, actually kind of utilize a special investigator to really help you dig into it, because it can be time-consuming. I've spent many hours trying to chase these things down, but in some cases, they're pretty savvy, and you just can't get to them. But in other cases, you can. So it really does, that's why I call it investigate. Go out there, look as much as you can, find out you can, see what clues are left, and then, you know, you can do the fake buys as well, which can give you different additional information.
Great. I see another question through the Q&A. Do you leverage the dark web at all in your research and investigation?
I utilize the deep web, just to kind of clarify what that is. So the visible web is what's indexed by the search engines. The deep web is stuff that's out there that are but are not indexed. The dark web is your .onion server that you can only get through Tor browsers and such. And I don't utilize the dark web in my investigations, but I do look at the deep web in places that way, as well as the visible web. And I guess I would add to that, and part of the reason for that one is when you get onto the .onion server and those places, you really are dealing with a new level of infringers and threat actors, and it can be pretty nasty out there as well. So most brand abuse that I've seen, especially in partner compliance, counterfeit, gray mark, all that, most of those guys are in the visible and the deep. There are some dark, and I know MarkMonitor has a service for that one, but for investigative purposes, the deep and visible is really where most of the stuff is happening. So.
All right, great. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Darla. That is all the time we have for questions. Thank you for sharing those best practices with the audience, and thank you, everyone, tuning in for your participation and for all the great questions. I did see a question that came through on how do you contact us for more information on infringement and help. The contact is on the slide that you currently are seeing. Also, I will be sure to give your information to the presenters so they can reach out to you directly. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar's presentation slides and a recording within the next couple of days. So be on the lookout for that email. That concludes our webinar for today. Thanks again for tuning in, and have a great day, everyone.